The evacuation of Research Station Theta-9 was never meant to be chaotic. It was meant to be orderly, efficient, precisely calibrated to save every single soul on the facility. That was before the ground opened up and swallowed half the landing pad. That was before the seismic alarms became a constant, deafening scream. That was before Protocol 7 was invoked, and the last evacuation shuttle lifted off with empty seats still on board. Corporal Elias Vance of the United Earth Colonial Marine Corps stood at the edge of the collapsing station, watching the shuttle's engines flare against the bruised purple sky of Kepler 186F. The shuttle grew smaller and smaller until it was just a speck, and then it was gone. He was alone. Or so he thought. The evacuation order had come without warning. A massive geological event, something the planet surveys had completely missed, was tearing the continent apart. The station's foundation was cracking. The emergency sirens had blared for exactly 4 minutes before the first shuttle launched. In those 4 minutes, Elias had helped 37 civilians into escape pods, had physically carried 2 injured scientists to the medbay shuttle, had ignored the panicked screams and the crushing weight of fear pressing against his chest. When the final shuttle began its boarding sequence, Elias had turned back. It was instinct. His training screamed at him to get on that shuttle, to save himself, to follow orders. But his feet carried him in the opposite direction, back into the crumbling station, because he had heard something. A sound that didn't belong to the groaning metal and shattering glass. A sound that was small, desperate, and alive. He found her in the lower laboratory, the section closest to the epicenter of the quake. The corridor was partially collapsed, forcing him to crawl through a gap barely wide enough for his shoulders. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of burning circuitry. His helmet lamp cut through the gloom, illuminating a scene of total destruction. She was pinned beneath a fallen support beam. She was not human. Her name, he would later learn, was Lyra. She was a Xylari, one of the slender, silver-skinned beings who served as the station's scientific liaison. The Xylari were a quiet, reserved species, known for their incredible intellect and their complete emotional detachment. They observed, they analyzed, they never interfered. Elias had exchanged perhaps 10 words with her in the 6 months he had been stationed at Theta-9. She had always seemed distant, almost ghost-like, moving through the corridors with an ethereal grace that made the human colonists uncomfortable. Now, she looked anything but ethereal. Her silver skin was smeared with dust and her own dark, viscous blood. One of her large, dark eyes was swollen shut. Her long, delicate limbs were twisted at unnatural angles. The beam across her legs had crushed her, and she was conscious, staring at him with an expression he could not read. Fear? Relief? He had no idea. Xylari faces were famously unreadable. "You should not be here," she said. Her voice was a soft, melodic whisper, barely audible above the groaning of the dying station. "The final shuttle has departed. I observed its launch." Elias ignored her. He dropped to his knees beside her, assessing the damage. The beam was massive, far too heavy for one man to lift. He would need leverage, equipment, time. Time they did not have. "Why didn't you evacuate?" he demanded, his voice rough with exertion as he tried to find purchase on the beam. "I was analyzing data," she replied, as if that explained everything. The seismic patterns were anomalous. "I believed I could predict the next event," warned the station. "I miscalculated." Elias let out a bitter laugh. "You miscalculated." "Yeah, I'd say so." He braced his back against the wall and pushed against the beam with his legs. It didn't move, not even a centimeter. He tried again, ignoring the burning in his muscles, the sweat pouring down his face. Nothing. "The station will collapse completely within 12 minutes. Lyra said calmly. You should leave. There is no reason for both of us to perish. Elias stopped pushing. He looked down at her, at this strange, emotionless creature who was calmly accepting her death. And for reasons he couldn't fully articulate, he felt a surge of anger.
Shut up, he said.
She blinked her one good eye. I do not understand. I said shut up. He was already moving, scanning the room for anything useful. A fallen cabinet. A length of pipe. A damaged maintenance bot slumped against the far wall. His mind raced through possibilities, discarding each one as quickly as it came. You are exhibiting irrational behavior, Lyra observed. Your probability of successfully moving this beam is less than 3%. Your probability of reaching safety before the collapse, if you leave now, is approximately 62%. The logical choice is clear. Elias grabbed the pipe and jammed it under the beam, using a chunk of debris as a fulcrum. He threw his weight onto the pipe. The beam shifted. Barely a millimeter. But it shifted. I'm not leaving you, he grunted through clenched teeth. Why? The question was simple, genuine. There was no emotion in it. Only pure curiosity. Elias didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had 1,000 answers, and none of them made logical sense. Because she was alive. Because leaving her felt wrong. Because his mother had raised him better. Because in a universe full of chaos and death, the only thing that mattered was the choice to be good when it was easier to be cruel. Because that's what humans do, he finally said. Another millimeter. The beam was rising. The middle. It took 7 minutes to free her. 7 minutes of straining against the pipe, of slipping and readjusting, of ignoring the protests of his own body. The station groaned and shuddered around them, pieces of the ceiling falling with increasing frequency. When the beam finally rolled away, Elias collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. Lyra did not move. Her legs were crushed, useless. She looked at him with that same unreadable expression. You have expended significant physical resources on my behalf, she said. Your core temperature is elevated. Your respiratory rate is dangerous. You have likely caused yourself injury. Elias laughed, a raw, desperate sound. You're welcome. He crawled to her side and gently as his trembling hands could manage, he lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, her body fragile, bird-like. She made no sound, but he felt her flinch as he adjusted his grip. I have calculated a new probability, she whispered against his shoulder. With my injuries, your speed will be reduced by approximately 40%. Our chance of reaching the emergency bunkers before the final collapse is now less than 15%. Stop calculating, Elias said, staggering toward the door. Start hoping. The corridor was worse than before. The gap he had crawled through was now partially blocked by fresh debris. He had to put her down, squeeze through, then reach back and pull her through, careful not to jostle her injuries. She helped as much as she could, pushing with her arms, her face a mask of silent concentration. They made it to the main atrium. It was unrecognizable. The glass dome that had once looked out onto Kepler's alien landscape was shattered, letting in the toxic atmosphere. Elias's suit would protect him for another hour, maybe less. Lyra had no suit. Her people could breathe this air for a time, but not forever. Not with her injuries. The emergency bunkers are to the east, Lyra said, her voice growing weaker. But the eastern corridor is compromised. The structural integrity reading is. I don't care about your readings, Elias cut her off. Is there another way? She was silent for a moment. The maintenance tunnels. They run beneath the station. They were designed to withstand seismic activity. But the entrance is on the opposite side of the atrium. Elias looked across the vast, collapsing space. It was a gamble. The ceiling was coming down in sections, huge chunks of metal and glass crashing to the floor. They would have to run, dodge prey.
"Hold on," he said.
And he ran. He ran with her in his arms, weaving through the debris field, feeling the impact of each near miss shake the ground beneath him. A piece of the ceiling crashed down behind them, so close he felt the wind of its passage. Another landed ahead, forcing him to veer sharply left. His lungs burned. His muscles screamed. But he did not stop. The maintenance tunnel entrance was a small hatch in the floor, half hidden beneath a collapsed information kiosk. Elias slid to his knees, fumbling with the release mechanism. It was jammed. Of course it was jammed. "I can assist," Lyra said. She reached down with one slender arm, her long fingers finding a hidden latch that Elias had missed. There was a hiss of released pressure, and the hatch swung open. Elias didn't hesitate. He lowered her into the darkness first, then dropped down after her, pulling the hatch closed just as another section of the atrium collapsed above them. They landed in darkness. Elias's helmet lamp flickered, then steadied, revealing a narrow tunnel stretching in both directions. The walls were reinforced with some kind of metal alloy, and the air was stale but breathable. "Which way?" he asked. Lyra pointed.
"East."
"The bunkers are approximately 2 kilometers in that direction." 2 kilometers. Carrying her through maintenance tunnels he had never seen. With limited oxygen, limited time, and no guarantee the tunnels would hold. "Great," Elias muttered. "I love a good walk." He picked her up again and started moving. The tunnels were a labyrinth. They twisted and turned, sometimes doubling back on themselves. More than once they encountered collapsed sections and had to find alternate routes. Lyra guided him, her mind a map of the station's infrastructure, her voice a constant, calm presence in the darkness. "You are slowing down," she observed after what felt like an hour of walking. "Your gait is uneven. You are favoring your left leg." Elias hadn't even noticed. Now that she mentioned it, he felt the dull throb of an injury, probably from when the beam had shifted and caught him in the thigh. "I'm fine." "You are not fine. You are exhibiting signs of significant physical stress. You should rest." "There's no time for rest. The bunkers will remain operational for approximately 72 hours. Resting for 10 minutes will not." I said no. She fell silent, but after a few more minutes, he felt her slender fingers touch his face. They were cool against his skin, surprisingly gentle. "You are crying," she said softly. Elias hadn't realized. He blinked and felt the moisture on his cheeks. Was he crying? He couldn't remember the last time he had cried. Maybe when his father died. Maybe never. "I'm not crying," he lied. "Your tear ducts are producing saline solution. That is the biological definition of crying." A pause. "Humans cry when they experience overwhelming emotion. Is that what is happening?" Elias kept walking. "I don't know what's happening. I just know that everyone left. Everyone got on those shuttles and flew away, and they left you here. They left us both here. And I'm so angry I can barely breathe. And I'm scared. And I'm tired. And I don't know why I'm carrying you except that I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try." He stopped walking. He leaned against the tunnel wall, holding her close, and for a moment, he just breathed. "I am not accustomed to being carried," Lyra said quietly. "Among my people, physical contact is rare. We do not touch. We do not hold. We do not comfort. I have never been held before." Elias looked down at her. In the dim light of his helmet lamp, he could see her large, dark eyes fixed on his face. And for the first time, he thought he saw something in them. Something that looked almost like wonder. "Does it bother you?" he asked. "Being held?" She considered the question carefully. No, she finally said. It does not bother me. It is unfamiliar, but it is not unpleasant. Elias smiled, a small, tired smile. Good, because we've still got a long way to go. He pushed off from the wall and kept walking. The tunnel began to slope upward. The air grew slightly fresher, tinged with the chemical smell of the surface. Lyra's eyes, which had been growing heavy, fluttered open. We are close, she whispered. The bunker entrance is approximately 200 meters ahead. Elias forced his legs to move faster, one foot in front of the other. Ignore the pain. Ignore the exhaustion.
Just keep moving.
The tunnel ended at a heavy blast door. Emergency lights flashed above it, casting the corridor in alternating red and white. Elias stumbled to the control panel and slammed his palm against it. The door didn't move. Manual override, Lyra said weakly. The panel to the left. There is a lever. Elias found it. He pulled with every ounce of strength he had left. The lever groaned, resisted, then finally gave way. With a hiss of hydraulics, the blast door began to slide open. Beyond it was the emergency bunker. Small, cramped, but intact. Life support systems hummed. Emergency lights glowed. It was safety. Elias carried her through the doorway. The moment they were inside, his legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, then forward onto his hands, Lyra still cradled against his chest. He couldn't move.
He couldn't speak.
He could only breathe, great heaving gasps that shook his entire body. The blast door slid shut behind them, sealing them in.
The end.
They lay there for a long time, recovering, breathing, existing. The bunker's automated systems detected their presence and began dispensing water and nutrient packs. Elias drank greedily. Lyra could not sit up, so he held the pouch to her lips and watched her drink. We will be rescued, Lyra said. The evacuation shuttles will return once the seismic activity stabilizes. They will search for survivors. Yeah, Elias agreed. They will. They will find us because you carried me here, because you refused to leave. She looked at him, and this time there was no mistaking the emotion in her large, dark eyes. I've spent my entire existence observing, analyzing, never participating. I thought emotion was inefficient, a weakness to be overcome. But you are inefficient. You are illogical. You are reckless and stubborn, and you cry when you are scared. And you are the strongest being I have ever known. Elias felt his throat tighten. Lyra, I do not know how to thank you, she continued. My people have no word for gratitude that carries the weight I feel. So I will simply say this. You saw me. Not as a Xylari, not as a scientist, not as data. You saw me as something worth carrying. And that is a gift I will carry for the rest of my existence. Elias reached out and took her slender hand in his. Her fingers curled around his, a tentative, unfamiliar gesture. You're worth carrying, he said quietly. You always were.